Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Hey, this is John Kasman. Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily marketing show. I'm your host, and we are going to get into a fun episode today. Before we do, I have to ask, if you haven't left us a review for the show, please do. You can leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, make sure you do that as well so you don't miss an episode. Today, we're going to be talking to Mike Morawski. Mike Morawski is a 30-year plus real estate investment veteran. Now, he has controlled over $285 million in real estate transactions. Mike is an entrepreneur, author, trainer, public speaker, and personal coach. And he has strong personal resilience and a deep desire to help others live an extraordinary life. Mike has coached hundreds of real estate investors to fulfill their dreams. Let's welcome to the show, Mike Morawski.
Hey, John, I had to look around for a minute and wonder if you were talking about me or somebody else. So,
don't you love those great bios? Like, yeah, I've done that, huh? Okay, cool.
Wow.
No, well, listen, you've done a lot of great things in your career, and I would love to see, over 30 years, that's a lot. We certainly can't pack all that into one episode, but maybe you can give us some of the highlights real quick and just give us a little bit more context on your background.
Yeah, what's really funny is I'm only 29, right? So, yeah, I've been in the real estate space for about 30 years. Prior to that, I owned a general contracting business, and I woke up one morning and I was burned out. I was still pounding nails and said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. So I took a year off, sold my company, took a year off. My wife and I at the time had bought a 2-flat and we house hacked it, and which wasn't popular back then, right? But today it's very popular. And in the midst of selling it, we had a real estate agent show up who helped us get it sold. And I really liked this guy and what he did. And he kind of helped me get in the business. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But he gave me direction. And I went into the real estate business selling residential real estate as an agent. And my first 8 months in the business, I sold 100 houses and was RE/MAX Rookie of the Year that year. And that was all for sale by owners. So I really went after the market hard. And then 2005, I went into the multifamily business, became a syndicator, raised about $18 million and bought 4,000 apartments in 5 different markets. From there, I have built and sold a couple of property management companies, and today I coach and train. All the years of experience and knowledge I thought would be great to give back to others.
Wow, that's a lot of great experience there. Thank you for sharing all that information with us. So just to recap a little bit, you actually owned a GC business, right? You were a general contractor. You got burned out of that, sold it. You had a 2-flat, ended up partnering with the agent who helped you sell that. And then from there, really started to become a real estate agent yourself, transitioning ultimately into being a syndicator, and now focus a little bit more on kind of coaching and educating other people to get into real estate, multifamily in particular as well. I want to take it to, really that transition from being an agent to getting in the syndication side, especially, 15 years ago. What exactly was that like? Because I can't imagine syndication wasn't as popular or widely known as it is today. And quite frankly, even today, it's not really that widely known, but we have podcasts and YouTube and other outlets to learn about these kind of things, which weren't really available back then. So how did you learn about syndication, and what kind of led you to go from, working as an agent to transitioning into that space?
Yeah, great question, John. One of my big philosophies is success leaves clues. And if we follow successful people and we model successful people, we can ultimately be successful ourselves, right? So when I was in the construction business, I did a lot of work for Inland Real Estate. Inland today is one of the largest REITs in the world. They are, offer partnerships. And for your listeners that might not understand, a REIT is like a mutual fund, right? You can buy shares in a stock. But I watched Inland 4 high school teachers who bought their first investment property, was a 4-unit building in Chicago. And they grew from there to be the largest REIT in the world, right? And their model was very simple. So they raised private equity and they married it with a great real estate deal and ran and operated that deal. And I knew a couple of people that were involved with those syndication deals. And you're right, it wasn't very popular 15 years ago. 2005, the market started to slide sideways. We knew shortly after that, Lehman Brothers, went down. But in 2005, I said, we were selling about 125 homes a year, my team and I said, next year, we're not going to sell this many properties. The market is going to fall out. We're going to have to do something different. I always wanted to be in the apartment business. I studied that model. I followed that model. I said, let's give it a try. So I went in, I did my first syndication. It was a small 11-unit building outside of downtown Chicago in a northern suburb of the city. And I learned very quickly that I wasn't going to make any money in Chicago, that I was going to need to go to different markets because of the price point and how I was going to model this business. And we learned a lot from that first 11-unit deal. But we grew from there, and we did 11 units. We did 64 units. I went to 187. And, the last one that I did was a 450-unit deal. So, and I would tell your listeners that there's no difference between closing that 11-unit deal than there is closing that 450-unit deal. It's all the same amount of work, right?
And Mike, that sounds like BS, right? To a lot of people listening, right? Like if I was listening to this and you said, hey, closing 11 units, no different than closing a 450 unit, it just sounds like BS. Now, you and I have been through similar experiences, and we've certainly said the same thing, but I want to push back on that. And I wanted you to give some context, right? Let's take our salesmanship off and just truly extrapolate a little bit. Like, how is a 450 unit and an 11 unit so similar? Explain a little bit more.
Well, all the work is the same, right? It's a commercial type of loan. So when you go to the bank and you're going to do a commercial loan, there's different guidelines that they have versus a residential guidelines. They're a little more stringent. They're going to look more at the deal than they are at the buyer. They're going to make sure that the deal cash flows. They're going to make sure that your inspections are all in line. When you do a inspection on a commercial unit, it's different than on the residential. Residential, you're just doing that home inspection per se. When you get into commercial, you've got your building inspection, you've got your ground inspection, you got a phase 1, which the bank requires. If there's any environmental issues, now you got to go to a phase 2. It's the same thing in that 11 unit as it is on that 400 unit. It doesn't, the work is the same. The difference is in the capital. The difference is in the amount of units and the management perspective, right? Here's what I would tell you. One of the big differences, on 11 unit, I didn't have on-site management. On the 400 units, I did have on-site management. There's a big difference there. But, you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence. Here's what I can tell you about that 11 unit, that in the beginning, I did not do enough due diligence. I was so excited. This was my first commercial deal I was going to do. And the seller said, oh yeah, this is a great deal. The rents are $75 below market and you'll be able to raise the rents and the tenants are great. And I was like, I was just so excited, right? That I didn't do the due diligence. And shortly after we closed, I found out that the seller was just full of BS, like you said, right? So I learned a lot along the way. And I think that it boils down to education. We went from 11 to 64 to 87 to 187. I didn't go from 11 to 400, but over a 30-month period, we did that and we grew very quickly. So it was an interesting progression.
And I think that's the point, right? It sounds crazy. And I know that people listening sometimes, there's a mechanism that comes up to say, hey, that just doesn't sound believable. But it is. And to the point Mike is making, with commercial real estate, the steps are the same. And the folks who are involved, the lenders, they don't really care if it's an 11 unit or a 400 unit building. I mean, they do to an extent. There's different products based on that. But in many regards, it's actually easier on these bigger properties for the reasons you mentioned. First and foremost, on-site property management. Now you have someone who's dedicated, maybe on a 450 unit, you have a full team, right? You have multiple people that are staying on site, managing the day-to-day aspects of the property. So you're not scrambling to go find a handyman because, the tenant in unit 3 has a toilet leak, right? You already have that full team on staff. They handle it, and they can handle it before you even know about the issue. So it becomes a little bit easier. And then on deals like that, partnerships are very common. So they are looking less at you as an individual and more at the team. And quite frankly, they just want to make sure the team is qualified. They're looking at the deal itself. They're looking at the building, the cash flow, the operations, and the business. So it is, in many regards, a little bit easier. They don't care about you as an individual as much as they care about the overall team, the deal itself. So if you are debating this, or you're a little concerned on scaling up to larger multifamily, you do want to figure out ways to scale and grow, and certainly build some of that confidence in some smaller mid-sized deals, or maybe being a passive investor on one of these larger deals. And then you can transition to the other side of the table. Mike, you said something I want to go back to about Chicago, and I'm a Chicago guy. I lived in Chicago for 8 years, love Chicago. Many of our listeners are in Chicago as well. And I get questions all the time. I host the Chicago Multifamily Club, and I know a lot of Chicago multifamily investors, and they say, why not invest more in Chicago? You said you realized you couldn't make the money you wanted to make syndicating in Chicago, and that was 15 years ago. So explain a little bit more about why Chicago was a challenge for you based on your business model, and why you decided to go to other markets.
Great question. Really great question. And I think it boils down to market timing. Not that you're timing the market right, but just what's going on in the market at the time. What's selling? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? What's the activity? Before I really cover that, though, this is all going to incorporate into one thing, but you talked about scaling. And I think in order to scale, and this is part of the market timing, you need to have systems and strategies. One of the things I always coach my people about is sit down and write out your strategy. I wanted to buy a market rate product, a B-class product that was working class clientele, that had pitched roofs, that had a little bit of brick veneer, that the list went on like that, right? We call it today our avatar, right? So what are you looking for in your tenant, or what are you looking for in your investor? That was my product avatar. And it all boils down to the strategy. Here's what I found in Chicago. At that time, in order for me to scale up and buy anything big in Chicago, I was going to pay $115,000 a unit, way too high. So, there's that old model in real estate, and it works in a lot of times, and a lot of times it doesn't. But if you can make 1% of your purchase price, you're going to make money on that property. And even in that small 11-unit building, I was outside of that 1% of my purchase price for the rents coming in. And what I found is that I could go to Dallas, or I could go into the Ohio Valley, and I could buy a product for half the cost of what it would cost me in Chicago, and my rents would be pretty similar. Probably about 85% was the rent. So I was about 15% off the mark on rents, right? So it was a little less expensive to rent in Dallas and the Ohio Valley than it was in Chicago, but I made more money. So, I bought 11 units in Chicago, and the next 3,900 I bought in, the Ohio Valley, Alabama, and the Dallas-Fort Worth market.
You said Ohio Valley, Dallas. What were the other markets you said?
Northern Alabama. So the Huntsville market, which today as we're talking, the Huntsville market is probably one of the hottest markets in the country, next to Atlanta. And so from a multifamily perspective, they say in the multifamily business, follow the smart money. That's where the smart money's at today.
No, absolutely. And listen, those markets are still hot today, right? You said Dallas, Fort Worth, Huntsville, Northern Alabama,
Yeah.
Ohio Valley. You really transitioned to get into these other markets. And just to recap, I love the product avatar. And we always talk about our investor avatar. And that product avatar, it's a product for you at the time, at least, was, a product where it was B class, pitch roofs. You really wanted to make sure you understood who that tenant base was, and trying to find the best place to get that resident, find that product, and then make sure that, it kind of came close to that 1% rule where you understood how much cash flow, how much rental income it was making based on the purchase price. And that was a great way to quickly gauge whether or not there was going to be enough value there to, take care of yourself as well as your investors. You mentioned those markets, and those markets are still great today. Take us back in time a little bit. What were you looking for criteria wise that made you land on those markets?
Yeah. So one of the things I look for in a market is I look for what the market is doing. I think there's 5 traps out there. One of them being the emerging market. What's going on in the market that's causing it to grow? The reason I bought that 11 unit was because in town, they were building 2 developments that were going to attract jobs and attract a couple of companies coming to the area. And back then, that was a smart move. I bought a 64 unit in a tertiary market outside of Indianapolis, about 35 miles outside of Indianapolis. It was basically a farm town, but across the street, they were building a super Walmart. It's 3,000 jobs. There's stability in that. So, when I look in a market, what's going on? What's the job growth? What's the population growth? Is it going up? Is it going down? If it's staying flat, it's going backwards. What's the education like in that town? What are the demographics? I want to know the story around the town. I want to know the story around the market. I want to know what the rents are doing. Can I buy a property? Can I put cap X money into the property, call it $2,500, $5,000, $7,000 a door, and what's my return on that investment going to be? Can I make 10% on my cap X money by pushing the rents? We can all say, hey, I'm going to buy an apartment and I'm going to go in and I'm going to put $5,000 a door into this building and push the rents to $200. But will the market substantiate it? Because I can say I'm going to do it, but if the market's not going to bear it, then it doesn't make any sense, right? So if we take a B-class property and we want to push those rents to try and push that property to be a B plus or maybe even an A minus property, it might not happen, but it could happen. So you just have to know what's going on. And how do we find those things out? Well, first of all, public records. You can see who's coming to town, what major corporations, what companies are looking at, the area. You can go to the building and economic development departments at the city hall. Economic development departments are very interested in what you can do to help them get to their next goal. So if you find out what their next goal is, every city, every village, every town has a 10 and 20-year plan, right? How do we fit into that plan and what can we do? What's the tax base? Is it high and why is it high? What are they lagging on? What could help? So what can, by you going into town and buying an existing multifamily property, what can you do to add value that's going to attract? So in order for me to push rents, I have to add value. Can I do it? And those are the big research questions, right?
Yeah, you just gave a great, powerful information right there. I want to break down a couple of things here. So first and foremost, the thing that you looked for in these markets, that were emerging markets at the time, is really understanding the story. What's driving this growth? And that's so key, right? I mean, we can easily get bogged down in data and numbers, but does the story make sense at a high level? What's happening here? What's going on? And you talked about going to that rural town, but knowing that that super Walmart was going to go up across the street. That is a great insight. And that's something that a lot of times locals aren't paying as much attention because they're familiar with it. So they don't feel like they need the research or stay on top of what's happening. But for you to come in and do the research, understanding what's happening, that gave you a leg up, knowing that, hey, there's going to be way more demand here in the future than there is today because this Walmart's going into place. You also talked about understanding, where's the education? What are the new developments that are taking place? What are the demographics? What's happening with the rents? So you want to understand the story. Does it seem like there's going to be greater demand in the future? Is that the trajectory right now? And if you can figure out that demand is going to be greater, that gives you some comfort to say, okay, maybe we can go in with a value add strategy where we can implement this CapEx budget, renovate some units, add some amenities, pretty up the place, and get more money for rents. And that's really the key to a value add strategy, is understanding if you were to invest X, could you see a return on all that capital, right? And are you adding value to the property? Are you going to ultimately add value to the investors? You mentioned that you looked at some of the resources. And again, these are great resources. Looking into the public records, looking at the building and economic development departments. Every city has those, and they all have plans. And it's a really simple, easy thing to do that not enough people actually do. But go, and you can look at a lot of the stuff online now. But if you're looking to invest in a city or a town, just go on their website and just Google Cincinnati economic development or whatever the city is and see what comes up. They're going to boast their plans because they're trying to attract investment. They're trying to attract investors. They're trying to attract those things. And they'll tell you, here's what we've done. Here's our plan. Here's what's going on. And that can help to inform your decision, or at least know where the city, where the government is going to be investing their capital. And that makes it easy to find the path of progress so you can have a leg up on where you're going to place your capital. So really great tips there, Mike. Thank you for sharing that.
Let me just interject here real quick too. We can spend a lot of money trying to do research. There's platforms out there that we can spend $2,000 a month trying to do research. But there's a couple of systems out there and a couple of websites that people can go to that are free, where, you talked about just Googling it. But, if you go to, there's two websites that I want your listeners to write down. And one is City Data and the other one is City Feet. So CITY, City Data or Feet. Two different platforms. One will talk more about economic growth. One will talk more about population and demographics. And those are the keys really to where things are going.
Awesome. Excellent resources there between City Data and City Feet. So make sure you check out those, and we'll put those in the show notes as well. So you have to scramble those down right now. You can just go to the show notes and click on those links there. Mike, so I want to talk a little about that transition with the investor side for a moment, because you talked about starting to work with investors and going from, that 11 unit all the way up to the 450 unit within a fairly short time frame, less than 3 years. You did all these different deals. So what was that process like, starting to work with investors, getting them on board? What kind of challenges did you face raising capital for these deals?
Here, I'm going to give you a strategy. This is the strategy I used to raise capital. I did I was in the real estate business. I was building a database. I had a database probably of about 2,500 people at that point. I built a database in a very short period of time from that to about 12,000. And we did that by going to, back then, Donald Trump was doing these real estate seminars, and they were weekend events. So we spent some capital, and we went and we would do a booth at these events, and we'd give away a TV, and we'd give some books away, and we'd meet people and talk to people, real estate investors. It was strictly to network with people. And we would come back with tons of business cards and tons of information sheets people would fill out, and we'd start following up with people. I did a seminar for real estate investors in my office Tuesday nights and Thursday nights every week for 2 years. I put 20 new faces on Tuesday and 20 new faces on Thursday in a conference room. and I gave a presentation about how to invest in multifamily real estate. At the end of that presentation, I would show a deal that we were syndicating. And John, I will tell you that people absolutely were falling over themselves to throw capital at us. And, this goes back to one of the things that you talk about, and that's integrity and character, right? I would tell people, I would tell them, we can't take your money tonight. We absolutely cannot. There's that whole 3-day cooling off period, and you got to wait and just relax. Here, go home in 3 days. I'll send you the documents. Take your documents, go to your attorney, have your attorney look at them. Let your attorney tell you that, not to invest because it's bad, and then let's see what it's like in a week for you. But people were going, really wanted to invest. And it's because we had a good model. We built a very good model, and we were making, our investors were doing well with us. So I think when you have a product, you have a model, and you are doing things that people are benefiting from, it organically happens for you. We talk about organic growth on the internet, right? And but when you are truly coming from a place of character and a place of empathy and a place of integrity, that organic growth just really happens.
No, I love that, man. You just gave him some great insights, and I want to come back to the booth thing for a second, but it comes down to adding value. I think that's the biggest thing. My biggest takeaway is what you did was you understood what people were looking for. You understood, going back to the avatar, you understood that target investor avatar. These were people who were interested in getting into real estate. I mean, that's why they went to these seminars, and they were seeking information. You found them. You gave them information through the seminar that you put together, the webinar or whatever the structure was, and you informed them that, hey, we actually have opportunities to invest with us. And by doing that, you gave them great value, you gave them opportunity. And when you add those things together, you can get some powerful results. And you did it consistently over 2 years. You didn't talk about you did it one time. You had 2,000 people show up and you were there. It was, 25 people every Tuesday, every Thursday. I mean, that's a slow grind over time, but you set yourself up to be successful. How did you get to, I guess the beginning is the, setting up at the Donald Trump seminars at the booth. How did you just reach out and say, hey, can I sponsor and have a booth set up? Or how did that opportunity manifest itself?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if you're familiar with those events, but back then these events were, they were live events. Today we're doing everything virtually, right? But these were live events, and Donald Trump would put this real estate seminar on, and he would have 20 guys come up on stage, give a presentation, and sell their books and tapes. And in the other wing of that building, they would have booths. So you would have all kinds of people there, syndicators back before syndications were really popular. You'd have property managers. There were people there who had rental properties, vacation properties and resort type things. There used to be a company similar to Airbnb called Bed and Breakfast. They were real big back then. Same model as Airbnb. And I think they were just a little bit ahead of their time, right? Yeah. But there were all those types of companies, and we just had a booth there, and just people would come up to the booth and, what are you here for? And what are you doing? And we talk about investing, and, it was more for building networking. And we would spend, those events would cost us $25,000 for the weekend. But they were well worth it, because the quality of investors that we met was really dynamic.
Yeah, they were qualified. I mean, these are people who had already, whether or not the event was free or paid, I mean, these are people who dedicated a weekend of their time to go to this seminar to learn more about real estate investing. So for you to talk to them and say, hey, I'm happy to share more about real estate investing, that was an easy decision for them, because they were obviously very centered on learning more. So really great tips. And I think the big takeaway, I mean, many listeners may not have $25K to invest in, that kind of an opportunity, but what I would say the big takeaway is find people where they're motivated and qualified. They've already expressed an interest in wanting to learn more about real estate investing. Connect with them there and add value to them. You've got to figure out how you add value to them, but add value to them there, and that will make that process a little bit easier. Mike,
hey, can I interject real quick? And I talked about that. Can I just interject about the Multifamily Global Summit real quick?
Absolutely.
So I talked about Donald Trump's event, right, where he'd have 20 speakers live on stage. Well, we're doing something similar. So the second week of October, we will be having our Multifamily Global Summit. John, you're actually going to be a speaker there, and we appreciate you for that. But we're going to have 20 of the greatest real estate, multifamily syndicators and small multifamily people, property management people, authors, speakers, podcasters, coming together on one stage. It's about education. It's about exposure. Our goal will be to have a number of people come to the event and to be able to learn. And any of your listeners that come, John, when they go register at the Multifamily Global Summit website, they put your name in and we'll get an early bird discount. So let your people know that. But this is going to be great for education purposes. What can somebody learn today? I'm such an advocate for education. And the more we learn, the more we can do, because knowledge is power, right? And the more knowledge, the more you can execute, because it gives you a sense of that power, gives you a sense of ability to be able to execute. And that's really what it boils down to for the investor, is the execution.
And Mike, what's the website that listeners can check out for this?
Sure. They could go to Multifamily Global Summit.
There you go. Multifamilyglobalsummit.com. I will be speaking at the event. I'm really looking forward to it. And Mike, you just talked a lot about education. That's actually a great transition for us here. Part of what you've been doing over the last, decade plus is helping other investors, through coaching and mentoring, and really helping people learn more about how to get into multifamily investing. And I know you're doing a lot in this space. Just talk to me about that transition into the coaching space and starting to help other people learn how to get into multifamily investing.
Yeah, great question. So, this is my sweet spot, right? I really like this. And I'm still coach today. I have a couple of coaches that I work with. And I remember 20 years ago when I wrote that first check for one-on-one coaching, I jumped right into one-on-one coaching and paid $1,000 a month. And, you look back 20 years ago, that was a lot of money back then. But what I saw the results, and the results were a 20% increase in my business year after year. My business grew as a direct result of that personalized coaching. Because in coaching, there's a difference between coaching and mentoring. I talked early on about that real estate agent that helped me sell that house that my wife and I house hacked. Well, when I went into the real estate business, I called him up and I said, "Hey, could I come and shadow you?" Remember I said success leaves clues? I said, "Could I come and shadow you for a couple of days?" He goes, "Look, I'll do better than that. I will make you a cassette tape." Now I'm dating myself, right? That's how long ago this was. But I'll make you a cassette tape of what you need to do to be successful. That's coaching. And there's mentoring in that too. But coaching really is more self-discovery. How can I help my client figure out for themselves what they need to know? So he helped me to discover what I needed to figure out about my real estate journey. I did exactly what he did. He was very successful. Back then, he was, in the top 0.5% of all real estate agents nationally. He was selling well over 100 houses a year. And that was unheard of, 20 or 30 years ago. And I did exactly what he did. And I told you that first 8 months, I sold 100 homes, all for sale by owner, because I went to the for sale by owner and I offered them a program that would help them sell their house. And as a result of that, there were a number of them that didn't sell. There were a number of them that did sell, but I was able to help them and coach them through selling their house or not. And if they didn't sell, they listed with me and I was able to sell it for them. So there was a lot of strategy behind that whole model. Coaching today, I really want to work with the investor and help the investor self-discover why they're doing what they're doing, get real clear on that, and then execute. I think there's 9 steps that the investor needs to take, and you could take those steps over a 9-week period and be doing your first deal like that, right? So it's just a matter of the knowledge and then the execution. And we can execute, but can we properly execute? So that's the other piece of coaching is how do we as coaches help our clients execute and do it more effectively.
Yeah. And you mentioned the difference between coaching and mentoring. And I want to really just get some clarity here because I know a lot of people struggle with those definitions and the words get thrown around interchangeably, and you could probably throw consulting in there as well, right? So coaching, mentoring, consulting. Just can you define those in your own words, right? How do you approach the definition of those 3 approaches to helping someone?
Yeah, the other one is therapy, right?
Therapy. I think we got a good sense of what therapy is. So yeah, absolutely.
So I think mentoring is really showing somebody what you do. If I wanted to come and shadow you for a day, John, because you were doing an investor event, and I wanted to come and shadow you and see how you were doing your investor event, that's mentoring. I'm learning by being involved. Therapy is somebody telling you what to do. Counseling is somebody telling you, hey, you need to make this change in your life or do this differently. But coaching is helping you to self-discover. So if I can help you self-discover, because we all have the answers within ourselves. We all know inside why we're doing something, why we want to do something, how to do something. And I could tell you how I do something, but it's much more effective if I help you figure out how you should do something and answer the question for yourself. And I think that's true coaching. I've been coached, still am coached today, but I coached for a real estate company for a number of years. And what we did was we coached agents how to do more business. And I always worked with those agents as to what could you do more of? What is the answer? See, if I can help you discover the answer yourself, now I'm not telling you. I believe that when we tell somebody how to do something, it's not as effective as when somebody tells us how they need to do something. Two totally different worlds, right?
No, I love it. And there's that accountability because people are going to take more ownership if they've discovered it themselves. And this is, we're both parents as well. We were talking about our kids earlier, and that's something even with the kids, right? I mean, if I tell them what to do, they may fight and push back. And I think even as adults who pay for help, it's easier and natural to want to push back on someone telling you what to do, especially entrepreneurs, right? People who have created their own path, created their own way. They're just naturally stubborn and challenge, other advice, even when they pay for that advice. So that self-discovery removes all of that. And now they can take ownership of it and move forward with confidence, knowing that this is their decision, not just some other person's opinion that maybe is something that is easy to be questioned there. Any other thoughts on coaching and maybe some tips for anyone who is maybe considering coaching or mentoring? Any tips on how to go about that process?
Yeah, here's one of the things that I notice in the real estate industry, and this can happen to you, and it happens to me as well, is we get so busy, our lives get off track, we get out of whack. And, it's like, everybody says if you can multitask, you can be more successful. Well, really, multitasking, you don't do anything really good at one point, right? We're better off just doing one thing, getting one thing accomplished, than going to the next task. I believe that what I want to do with my clients is I want to teach them how to live a more quality lifestyle and a more balanced lifestyle. So I work with each one of my clients on teaching them and helping them discover that if they live a balanced lifestyle, that they can be more effective in their professional career and that they can get more done and be more successful as a result of it.
Love it, Mike. Let's go on to our Bullseye Round. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, you bet.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about, and I think it's in my bio, is that I'm very resilient, right? We all have failures. I have had failures in my life, and it's a matter of bouncing back from them. I think that if I have to equate a failure, it's that first deal that I didn't do enough research and enough due diligence. I talked about that 11-unit deal. And if I look back on it, what I should have done was I should have done the due diligence, gone through the steps. Hey, what's the market like? What's the tenant base like? What's the area like? How much CapEx money do I need to put in the deal? And what are my results going to be as a result of that? Don't take the seller's word for anything. Don't take the broker's opinion for anything. Yeah, you know what? Get the whisper price, but figure that, you can do better than the whisper price too from the broker. But make sure that you are doing your homework and doing your due diligence. It keeps you from failing. And when you do fail, get right back up and go after it. Don't let it keep you down. I think too many people let failure stop them or cause them to pause too long when we have to get up and we have to move on.
You mentioned City Feet and City Data earlier, but what are some other digital and mobile resources you recommend for your business?
Boy, that's a great question. I do spend some money on some other sources. There's Reomni. There is REIS, REIS, that are great research platforms. But when I look at property management, and property management is one of the key components in this whole thing, right? Once you purchase that property, you've got to manage it. I look at software around that. There's a couple of really good platforms out there. There's Buildium and there's Appfolio, both really good multifamily property management software. And when we look at that, we want to be on a platform that's going to have our tenants' information, our investors' information, going to have our property information, it's going to have our banking information all in one place. We don't want to have to go from this software to this software to this software. We want to be able to do it all in one place. And I think that's really important because it streamlines it for us.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
The best book I've probably ever written on real estate investing is Gary Keller's book called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. It's not a new book. It's been around for a number of years. I talked about those real estate seminars I held. I taught that book for a number of years. I actually do a webinar today that is around that book. It's about real estate investing and the strategy and the mindset behind it. I think every investor, whether you're brand new or whether you're seasoned and done thousands of units, should read that book. And then, John, I have to plug my book if I can, which is coming out at the end of September here. It's called Exit Plan. And, all my years in the business, all my years of coaching and training, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've spent on coaching and training and books and seminars, I've always walked away wondering, how do you get out of a deal? And I wrote a book called Exit Plan that talks about that talks about, the strategy behind exiting the deal. We've all heard the old cliche that you make money when you buy real estate. True, you do, but you don't realize that income until you exit the deal. So we have to talk about that. And it's not just selling it. There's a number of ways to get out. So I talk about that in the book.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Boy, you're digging deep. So one of my daily habits is the time that I spend with the Lord in the morning. I get up and that's my big thing in the day. So.
All right. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
The power of influence, the power of relationship. I first got in the real estate business, and I had a churn and burn business. So that means I prospected every day. I could tell you that I made 20,000 dials on the telephone every year in order to sell 125 listings. And I could tell you my numbers. Every great business knows its numbers. But it was a churn and burn business. Are you thinking of selling your house? No. Today, it's about relationship. I think I mentioned to you in our previous conversations that another great book I've read is by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And people should read that book and take it to heart. I've actually just told my 15-year-old son about that book and suggested that he read it because it's about the relationship with people today.
All right. On a lighter note, I know you're in the Chicago area and there's lots of great food options out there. Give me the best place to grab a bite.
Okay, so there's a little Italian restaurant that I absolutely love called Tofano's. It's over by the UIC. It's on Vernon Parkway. And it is one of these places that you walk into. It's got 10 or 15 items on the blackboard. You order off the blackboard. They have the best calamari and the best angel hair pasta with mussels you'll ever have. So their gravy's awesome, and it's just a wonderful place.
Mike, I love it. Listen, for our listeners who want to learn more about you, the events you've got going on, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, great. Thank you. The name of my company is My Core Intentions, and I've called it that because I want to help you find your core intention. You can reach me at mike@mycoreintentions.com, or you can go right to my website at mycoreintentions.com and sign up for a free 60-minute coaching session. Even if it goes nowhere after that, at least maybe we can get you some direction and some good tips and points that would help you spur on your investment career.
Mike, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I look forward to the event you've got coming up, so I'll certainly be a part of that. And we'll have to check out your book, Exit Plan, as well. It should drop right around the time this episode comes out. So Look forward to checking that out. And just to recap, man, I really enjoyed our conversation today talking about, your journey getting into real estate, going from the GC side to the agent side, ultimately getting into syndication before getting into the coaching piece of it, really helping us understand why you made the transition from focusing on your backyard, Chicago, to expanding to other markets, what you look for in an emerging market that is really helpful for our listeners to learn more of what they should be paying attention to, and then ultimately getting into syndication before moving into coaching, and even breaking down the difference between coaching and mentoring and consulting and just your perspective on that. So really appreciate our time today. Thank you again for coming on Target Market Insights, the Multifamily Marketing Show. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Bye, everybody.